Respond News, dispatches on the hidden threats to democracy.
Welcome back to the Respond podcast, a series that brings you closer to the people and ideas behind new research on corruption and its concealed effect on democracy. I'm Manuel Delia from ESCOM, a partner in the Respond project. In today's episode, the second in our series, we're joined by Andriy Bilecki from the Anti-Corruption Research and Education Center in Ukraine, or ACREC. Andriy is part of the Respond project, a European initiative aimed at revealing how corruption functions and how we can strengthen societies against it. In this conversation, we'll hear about Andriy's work, his perspective from Ukraine, and why research like this matters well beyond national borders. My first question is in the context of Ukraine right now. Over the last few months, perhaps surprisingly for someone observing from far, corruption was a political issue coming out of Ukraine, a country which is the field of a battle, of a war right now. How is it that corruption in wartime is a relevant subject?
Well, it's a very complicated question, to be honest, because when the war erupted in February 2022, civil society and society as a whole, together with government, had the unwritten pact between each other. So we have to defend our enemy, and then we will deal with our internal problems. This unwritten pact was kept for, I think, 2 or 3 months. But after that, for civil society, it was hard to ignore the problem of corruption which was in government of Ukraine. After that, after the open data registers that were open in mid of 2022, it became possible to detect and expose corruption in the procurement system, especially in the military procurements, and that is how this process began to evolve again after the full-scale invasion. Of course, the corruption during the war, it harms internally the country, which has to stand to the external enemy, and we have to deal with it. But again, it is a good news that we can expose corruption, that we have all the mechanisms and instruments to expose it, which gives us a hope for a better future.
The debate that we saw, and we became aware of it, out of public protest. And there was protest because of legislation that would have perhaps restricted the ability of Ukraine to clean itself out of corruption. Those protests were effective. How do you account for this surprising power of public opinion in the politics of Ukraine today?
I wouldn't say it became a surprise for us, because we have already seen such mass protests throughout the history of independence of Ukraine. It started in 19th of the last century. It was in 2004 when the so-called Orange Revolution erupted. It was the same during the Revolution of Dignity. So I would say this is in our blood, that we are protesting against really, really bad decisions of the government. And this decision to cut the procedural independence of the key anti-corruption investigation bodies, it was a bad decision and it was a mistake. I think government did not expect that the mass protest would erupt in the country, and that the anti-corruption movement would be so strong, especially among the young people, because the young people, the students, they represented a high majority of the protesters on these protests. So it wasn't a surprise. It was another good sign of that civil society in Ukraine is secure, and we have a new agents of change in upcoming to the civil society.
Would you say that the context of war makes young people more sensitive to the risks of corruption or less?
Yeah, of course, the war make not only young people but everyone more cautious to the cases of corruption, because again, when you're fighting external enemy, you could not, make it more possible for them to win. So corruption, it deters the internal structure of the government, of the society, and you could not let your guard down because of such things. So, for example, you have to provide army with good equipment, with good food to keep soldiers fit and to keep their strength, but you cannot do that because of the corruption. And of course, people have to react more precisely to these cases.
When we speak of war, we also anticipate and look forward to the time of peace. And in Ukraine, that will be the time of reconstruction. There is some warning that the reconstruction of Ukraine will be an opportunity for corruption, because obviously there will be a lot of money in public spending. Is this caution and this concern reasonable or disproportionate?
Well, it's a twofold question. So, from the perspective of corruption, of course, we as civil society, we as researchers expect to see corruption, because where there is a big money, there is a lot of corruption risks. And we already seen some corruption cases on reconstruction processes which took place in the reoccupied territories. But on the other hand, this is the opportunity for anti-corruption. So even during the war, the civil society, the government, we acknowledge the future corruption risks of reconstruction, and we've already taken some steps to try to mitigate this corruption risk. For example, the government, together with civil society, they launched the so-called DREAM system, which allows you to see how the reconstruction processes are going on, where the money are spent, and you can see this public monitoring on the reconstruction processes. Some civil society groups, they started to do the monitoring of future reconstruction. They started to prepare for the future reconstruction. They started also to prepare people for future reconstruction. For example, we in Akrai, together with the Ministry of Infrastructure, we launched a certificate program for the compliance officers, which would be working on reconstruction, and we help them to understand how to identify corruption risks in public procurement during reconstruction, how to establish a work of the compliance officer, and etc. etc.
Let's broaden the scope then. ACREC is part of the Europe-wide Respond research project. How do you find that the experience that Ukraine is currently undergoing and the findings of your research contribute to our wider understanding of how corruption is changing in today's Europe?
Ukraine was always on the frontiers of anti-corruption since 2014. We had a lot of good instruments and innovative instruments developed since that time, especially when we are talking about how civil society contributed to the development of innovative instruments and how they are used in anti-corruption activity. So this is one of the best reasons why Ukraine is a part of the Respond project and why Ukrainian experience is considered within the Respond project, because we have such a good innovative project like DIA, which is the e-government platform where people can do and get the governmental services within a few clicks from smartphone or from the laptop. We had such a great procurement system called Prozoro, where everybody can see everything. So you can access the Prozoro system, choose whatever governmental structure you want, school, kindergarten, and etc., and you can see what they are procuring. You can compare the market prices, you can compare the services provided, you can see everything. So I think this innovative approach also combined with the incredible civil society activity, this makes Ukraine interesting on why we should study anti-corruption movement in Ukraine.
Indeed, the participation of civil society is a key lesson that we have seen Ukraine teaching us over the last few months. How encouraged are you about the state of health of civil society in the rest of Europe and its willingness, determination, and ability in tougher times to stand against corruption and bring about meaningful change?
Well, it's an interesting question because almost no one in Europe has the same experience as Ukrainian civil society, because we are operating during the war. Of course, we can get the example of Georgian civil society, which are operating during the state capture regime, and it is really inspiring how they can hold up within this system. And we see the law on external agents, which was passed by the Georgian parliament, which actually doesn't allow Georgian civil society to operate freely. We can see these signs of authoritarian regimes growing up in Europe, and it's also frightening, to be honest. But still, I can see a good sign that civil society is still in place. They are still operating. They're still doing their jobs despite having this hard and not really good political regimes and political features in their country. So I think civil society is one of the main drivers of not only anti-corruption reforms, but reforms, and they are trying to keep the governments accountable. And that's what we need even in these hard times that we're living in.
Andriy Bilecki, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was Andriy Bilecki from the Anti-Corruption Research and Education Center in Ukraine, sharing his insights as part of the Respond project. If you'd like to learn more about the project, visit eu-respond.eu, where you'll find details about our research, partners, and upcoming events. Thanks for listening to the Respond podcast. Don't forget to follow the series so you can catch our upcoming conversations as we continue exploring how corruption affects democracy and what can be done about it. This podcast and the Respond project are funded by the European Union under the Horizon RIA program, GA number 1011-32405.
Respond News. Dispatches on the hidden threats to democracy.